You're listening to the Zine Collector Podcast, Episode 4, 2018 Year of the Perzine, Part 2, Consent and Copyright. Hello Zine friends, welcome to the Zine Collector. I'm your host Jaime Nyx. Let's talk about zines. That's why we're here after all, isn't it? Hello, episode 4. Yeah, I told you I'd keep getting excited about these episodes forever, basically. Thank you all once again for the lovely feedback to the last episode. I'm not sure exactly. There was one thing I was anxious about with the previous episode, but I was definitely exceptionally and incredibly anxious, and I think it was only the length of the recording, which was considerably longer than the finished product, but I think it was the length of recording it that stopped me from doing it a million times. Like, there was just something, it was a case of I was being attacked by the doubt monsters, basically. So again, thank you for the lovely feedback as always. Basically, the feedback is always wonderful and keeps me going and helps me have a sword and shield against the doubt monsters. Fighting them off and all of that good stuff. I was especially happy to hear that there were some younger listeners who had felt that they couldn't write about their lives, that they were too young to write about their lives or have something to say in that regard, who were now inspired to say, hey, I can write a Perzine, that sort of thing. There shouldn't be any age gating in that genre. And that was absolutely beautiful, because that basically is one of my goals, really, with the last episode, to just help people to see that they can make a Perzine if they want to. You don't have to wait to be any particular age or get permission from anyone, that sort of thing. So that was really very beautiful to hear. Yeah, I also wanted to say, based on a comment on a previous episode, that things here, I feel like I'm falling into a rhythm. Maybe not a rhythm, but everything is feeling not regular yet. I don't feel like I've been doing everything long enough, but I do feel comfortable with the way things are in the show right now with segments and things like that. But that being said, things are still flexible. If you have suggestions, requests, that sort of thing, let me know. I am not guaranteeing anything, of course, but yeah, I'm a pretty flexible person. Yes, I have wanted to do a podcast for a long time, but at the same time, if you're not enjoying it, then what's the point, really? I mean, I don't like the sound of my voice that much, so yeah, I don't actually like it at all. But yeah, do podcasting if you have a problem with that, because wow, you have to get used to the sound of your own voice very quickly. So I'll just get right to it, move on to news and announcements, and say, yay, no more wobbly desk. This is for the the people watching. I apologize for this brief note to the people who only listen, but basically I had a really wobbly table, an extremely wobbly table, and when I get excited I move my hands around a lot, and yeah, I go a bit all over the place, and it was wobbling the camera, and that was really annoying, and it was bothering me, but it was also bothering me to try to keep my hands still for an entire podcast. Now, this table isn't perfect, but it's better, and shout out to local community buy sale groups and the people who aren't trying to make a profit there. They're just, trying to sell their stuff and move it along to another home that will love it, because I got a desk for my my computer, and now I have this lovely, well, technically it's our kitchen table, but it is a lot steadier, and so the video won't be so wobbly, and that might actually help with the audio as well. I'm not sure if there was nothing I caught as such, but anything that keeps the mic steady is a good thing. The only other announcement I really have for this podcast is that March is coming up, and what does that mean? That means it's Mini Zine March! Yeah! And you're wondering, okay, Nyx, what does that mean? Basically, Mini Zine March is something I started a couple years ago, and it just means that March is the month that I dedicate to my love of Perzines. I always love Perzines. Do we really need a month? No, we need a whole year. 2018. Okay, tangent over. So March. I review only mini zines during the month of March. Now, for the purposes of definition, I say that a mini zine is anything that's smaller than A5, or if you're using American size, is a half fold. If it's, quarter fold, most of them are quarter fold, or the one page folded into 8 pages. Yeah, my definition of mini zine for the sake of mini zine March. Now, I don't have a list of activities as such for the month, but I do encourage you all to make mini zines during the month. There was one person who said that they were thinking of making a mini zine every single day for the month, and wow, that is amazing. I would be way too scared to even challenge myself to that. I'd be like, no, sorry. But good luck to you. And if you are mini zining in March, be sure to send me a link in various places so I can check it out and cheer you on. Because yay, mini zines. And if you're making mini Perzines, that even like you're doubling up, aren't you? March 2018, month of the mini Perzine. Maybe, I'm not sure. We'll see how that goes over, eh? And now we get to that fun part of the podcast where I read off some Zine events that are happening around the world in the next fortnight. On February 21st in Dundee, Scotland, we have Paper Arcade Zine Jam. On February 24th in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, we have Art Space Book and Zine Fest. Also on the 24th, we have the Tally Zine Fest in Tallahassee, Florida. And we have the world's tiniest zine fair number 2 happening on the 24th in Albany, I almost said Washington. It's Albany, Western Australia in Australia. On February 25th in East Bay, California, we have the Dear Diary Zine Fest, a Perzine-focused zine fest. And shout out to Long Arm Stapler for their second episode, interviewing the organizers of the Dear Diary Zine Fest. On February 26th through March 2nd in Toulouse, France, we have Stage Fanzine, which is something and a workshop. Excuse me, my one semester of French has failed me. I'm not sure, but there's a workshop involved. On February 28th in Northampton, Massachusetts, we have Forbes Library Zine Club. On March 1st in Cincinnati, Ohio, we have Drink and Draw Zine Make and Swap. On March 3rd in Fort Worth, Texas, we have the Fort Worth Zine Fest. Also on March 3rd in Fremantle, WA, we have the Pulp Paper Fair. Fremantle. It's either Fremantle or Fremantle. It's one of those things in Australia, and I haven't been to WA, so you'll have to forgive me. Fremantle? Either way, I apologize. Anyway, so in that place in WA, the Pulp Paper Zine Fair happening on the 3rd. On the 3rd and the 4th in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, in Australia, we have the Halfway Print Zine Fest. And finally, on March 3rd and 4th in Taipei, Taiwan, we have Zine Day Taiwan. Oh, fantastic, Zine Day. And there is a lot more where that came from. So if you would like a direct line to zine events happening all around the world, or to make sure that your zine event is listed in the World Zine Event calendar, please check out @fanzines. Links will be in the description. @fanzines is on Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon now. So definitely check that out and see what's happening or make something happen in your community. Okay, and now we get to it. Consent and copyright. So in the last episode, we talked about Perzines and what I feel are their importance in the world, as well as my rundown of Perzine, specifically one Perzine series, Pieces, and how that dramatically affected my life over the years. So in this episode, we're going to get into matters of consent and copyright, because as much as our lives are our own, as much as no one can have our memories but us, it's still a little bit complicated when you're writing about other people. We don't live in a vacuum as much as we may want to sometimes, and the inevitability of life is that we run into other people, and other people influence us for better and for worse. Now, you can definitely choose to write a Perzine that doesn't involve any other people, in which case, see you next episode. Sorry, probably a really bad joke. But so you can definitely do that. You can write a Perzine and just not involve other people, and that is definitely one way to protect you from some of the things I'm going to mention coming up. But I am going to assume that many people, like me, write about other people and their influences on our lives, again, for better or worse. Now, when the suggestion came in for this topic, it was only about consent, but within the context of Perzines and writing about other people in Perzines, I really felt that consent and copyright were very much linked. They were, at the very least, entangled, and that's why I felt that I should talk about them both, because I feel like there's a head side and a heart side. There's the legal side, and then there's being a nice person, except sometimes you can't always be a nice person, that sort of thing. I'll try not to get ahead of myself, but in the end, I felt, most people think copyright in regards to written work, but after all, aren't our memories and our experiences of our lives just as precious to protect? At least I think so, and they are a bit tangled, I will admit that, but I do hope that I can cover all of the subjects in a way that's not too confusing for anybody. I shall do my best, but I fully admit that I can be a bit scattered. Ooh, nearly knocked the mic. If you heard anything, I apologize. So let me tell you about a few events that helped inspire the writing of this episode. In 2010, zine makers around the world started receiving emails from someone named Teal Triggs. And basically, the emails followed the same format. Hi, I'm Teal Triggs. I wrote a book called Fanzines. I have used this and this of your zine or zines. I hope that's okay. Bye-bye now. And left it at that. Last year, someone messaged me and said, hey, could you please send me the printable version of your zine? They were just going to scan it, but if I could just send them the printable version, that would save them a lot of time and effort. Thanks. And recently, someone suggested making a zine that would include copied pages from other people's written work, and yet not expressing any plans for getting permission to do so. In the first instance with Teal Triggs, she ended up using zine covers and zine interiors without permission. And even worse than that, she ended up publishing incorrect things as fact because she took the better to beg forgiveness than ask permission route. And even when people brought up the fact that things were wrong before the publishing date, she didn't do anything about it. In the event that had to do with someone messaging me and just asking for the print copy because it would save them the time and effort of scanning my zine, they didn't ask me if I was okay with that. I could either make it easy for them or make it hard, but either way, it was going to happen. In the most recent example, if it's all done in fun, what's the harm? If I'm not making a profit on the zine, then what's the harm? In all of these events, there's an assumption that it's okay because we're just zinesters, right? We're just zine makers. It doesn't matter, does it? But the thing is that it really, really does. For something where the answer usually comes down to a very simple yes or no, the issue of consent, even just within the context of Perzines, of writing Perzines, is a big and complicated one. So before I get started, I want to make a note that should probably be fairly obvious, but disclaimer anyway, I'm not a lawyer. And even if I was, the thing is that these things change from state to state. There are different types of laws and legislation from state to state, country to country, and so you really need to be familiar with local as well as international, depending on the situation. I have a professional writing and editing background, classes and such like that, and I do have a bit of experience as an author, but that being said, that's it. That's the limit of my expertise or lack thereof. Okay, writing about other people. So what is consent? Consent is basically the act of giving permission for something to happen. I consent for you to do this. I consent for you to send me cupcakes. Please? I apologize. A bit of a flippant joke given the the topic. Moving on. So it's the act of giving permission for something to happen. In my own life, Wanderer is actually the first person I asked for consent in regards to writing my Perzines. I talked to him, I set him down, I explained what I was thinking about, I explained what topics in his life and our lives that would forever be, out of bounds, like he didn't have to worry about me writing about certain things, and I introduced him to the possibility of his zine name, which he ended up liking, and he gave me permission. In that case, it was as simple as that. When it comes down to it, most people are okay with this sort of thing. Most people are okay. I mean, as long as you're not ripping them a new one, most people are happy so long as you ask permission. As long as you grant them the basic respect of saying, hey, may I? Then people are happy and excited. If you are polite and respectful, and if you ask someone and they say yes, you might even find that you have a new reader or even a new fan in the future. When I was writing my novel Dark Echoes, I ended up turning it into sort of a community thing of sorts. I ended up asking a lot of people if they wanted to be characters, and with their permission and for fun, it ended up where there was this new community of people all around this book because they all shared the thing in common is that they were all in the book. And it ended up where people requested, I want to be a villain, I want to be a hero. Unfortunately, one person was a little disappointed because he really, really wanted to be a woman in the book, and our wires got crossed a little bit, and I didn't realize he wanted to be a woman in the book, but next one. I promise you can be a woman in the next one. Anyway, so it ended up being a really lovely, wonderful, warm thing. And it all came from people saying, yes, I'd like to be in your book. But at the same time, it came from just having the respect to say, may I? I feel like these days, and I feel like I say these days a lot, but with things the way they are, I feel like a little respect goes even further than it may have in the past. Because people can often expect the worst. And yet here we are. And I'm just going to take a side note. If you hear a little something, it's because it's raining outside and I have a nice ColorBond noisy roof, and I'm sorry, but I'd really like to keep recording today, so I apologize for background noise if you can hear it. Back to Dark Echoes, my novel, and my Perzine series. In the end, a lot of people really were pleased to be asked. And in the end, that's what it comes down to, really. Just affording people the basic respect, understanding that this is your life or this is your name, and I would like to use this in some way. Are you okay with that? So what if you don't have permission? Now, if you're writing without permission, it's important to note, I think, that this applies to businesses and organizations as well as people. Largely, it all coincides from a legal standpoint. Whether you're writing about insert business or insert person, if you say something negative about them, it can have the same legal ramifications. Really, it all comes down to defamation. Now, defamation is the action of damaging someone's good reputation, hence why businesses and organizations, they don't often do it, at least not historically, but they can do it. I mean, you have some leeway with reviews, but you're not protected because you're talking about a business instead of a person. Now, there are two types of defamation. There's libel and slander. Slander is the spoken version of defamation. Libel is the written one, and obviously, so we're going to be talking about libel rather than slander. Libel is a written defamation. Basically, the argument that you have damaged someone's good reputation by what you've written. One thing to note is that, yes, people, businesses, organizations, you cannot libel the dead. But you have to be really careful still, because if by what you say about a person who is deceased somehow implicates someone who is still living, a living relative of this person did this thing and I saw them and they've now died and so I'm protected. But if you imply that someone saw that something, someone living saw the illegal act of someone who's deceased, you're implying that that person living had something to do with it, and that person can still sue you for defamation, even though you were mainly talking about the deceased person. Now, it's a little bit of a complex issue, so I hope that makes sense. But basically, if you were writing about someone who's deceased, just be careful about any implications to living relatives. Even if you're directed in one direction, just keep in mind anyone on the peripheral. If you're writing something positive, don't worry about it. You're not going to damage someone's reputation by writing something positive, so there's no claim for defamation. And even if you're writing something that's a bit neutral, not necessarily positive, but not negative either, you can't, again, there's the argument, you're not damaging someone's reputation by writing something that's neutral. So you're fairly good there. Like, again, I'm not a lawyer, but you're fairly good there. The thing to note is that if you're writing something negative, saying "in my opinion" isn't going to keep you safe, or saying it's just a review isn't going to keep you safe. Yes, there are certain protections if you are reviewing something, but at the same time, in my opinion, so-and-so is an abusive, manipulative psychopath. Just because you've prefaced that statement with "in my opinion," you are not protected from legal action by so-and-so. It's still, even if it's your opinion, it's damaging to their reputation, etc., etc. It's all, frankly, annoying, but that's law for you. Even if it's the truth is a defense, but it's not an ironclad defense. Saying it is truth will help you. Proving it is truth will help you, but it will not 100% protect you from any possible ramifications, which is also another unfortunate side of the law. Well, I know it's a little bit lacking in terms of being a full episode. I want to keep moving on and just say that I hope that gave you some clarity as far as libel and what little protections there are, even though there aren't all of that many. I'll put a few resources of articles and things I used when researching this episode into the description, so you can read further, that sort of thing, learn more, follow up, etc., etc. I don't want to scare anybody or put anybody off writing a Perzine. I just feel that you should know what you're getting into. Because it would be easy to say, okay, so the simple answer is always get permission, isn't it, Nyx? And I'd love to say yes, but I think we all know that getting permission getting consent from everyone you want to write about isn't always as cut and dry as we'd like it to be. A lot of the time, we write Perzines to help us process traumas that are all too often inflicted by other people. In some cases, it's impossible to get consent because the person is deceased, and sometimes it's not possible to get consent because the person has said no. But there are also times that the act itself of asking for consent would be damaging to the person asking, would be traumatizing in and of itself to the person asking. And that's, especially when it comes to Perzines and memoir writing and stuff like that, that's where things get complicated, even more so than the the aforementioned legal side of things. During the first 20 years of my life, I was abused. I was abused by the people I was meant to trust and love, the people who were meant to take care of me. And as much as I hate it at times, that abuse in my past is something that influences me to this day. It makes me who I am in both good and bad ways, and thus I write about it. I write, I process, I explore, I deal with things through my writing, and some of that writing goes into my Perzines. And because of that, I risk being sued. And now I risk being sued for slander as well. Wow. Risking being sued for slander while I'm doing a podcast about libel. Both at the same time. If that's not multitasking, I don't know what is. Allons-y. So there it is. I was abused. I am a survivor. I write about things that happened. Am I ever going to ask for consent from the people who abused me? No, I'm not. I have my reasons, but I will not. Not now. I have not in the past, nor will I ever. Am I risking legal action? Absolutely. That is a legal reality that I have to deal with. It is what it is. I wish so much that I could wrap things up for you. I wish I could put them in a nice bow and say, here is how you write about your trauma and stay protected. Here is how you write about your abuse and stay protected. But honestly, the only protection is not to publish your writing. As much as I want truth to be the defender, the justice that would help us all should we get sued, it's not the reality. But there are things you can do to help protect yourself, to make it less likely that you will be sued by someone if you are going to write about them and cannot obtain consent for whatever reason. And now we have Nyx's Perzine writing tips. There's only 5. 1. Ask for consent whenever you're able and whenever you're safe to do so. Cover that base if you can. 2. Don't use real names. Now, I've found that people usually like Zine names because they want to know what you would call them. And I have given people names from Top Shelf for a person who really had a good, a discerning taste for various liqueurs, to Roman gods and goddesses, to Wanderer. I actually don't know where Wanderer came from when I was thinking about writing about him. It just popped into my head. And so, yeah, in general, people have liked their Zine names. And again, it's an added protection. It's a really simple thing that makes it less obvious who you're talking about. And thus, there you go. A little bit of cotton wool around you, a little bit of protection from any legal ramifications. Back when I was a little bit younger, I submitted a story to Chicken Soup for the Soul, And I wrote about someone in my life who was a bit frustrating but ended up teaching me a valuable lesson. Now, I submitted that and Chicken Soup for the Soul, and if you're not familiar, they're a rather large line of books. Chicken Soup for the mother soul, the teen soul, the golfer's soul, the dog lover's soul. They have so many books out there. So I submitted my story. It got upset. No, the story's fine. I submitted my story. It got accepted. And basically the only thing they wanted me to do was either change the name of the person I was writing about or get that person's consent. Couldn't be bothered sending that person a contract that they have to sign and send back to me, blah, blah, blah. I changed the name and it was done. So this is a big company, and just changing the name of the person involved, that was enough for them to feel that they were covered legally. Now, this is a big company that would have a massive legal team as well, but I feel like that is a good example of saying, okay, if that's how a big company responds, then changing names is going to help me with what I'm doing. And on that same track, we have number 3, which is don't be too descriptive. Or if you're going to be descriptive, don't be literal about it. Like, Nyx always twirls her hair, and then make that Bob always twirls his blonde hair or something like that. Change the details. If I have a cat named Bob, then it becomes a dog named Sparky, that sort of thing. If you change these little details, you can still speak your truth. You can still process things without making yourself vulnerable in as many ways, that sort of thing. If descriptions and names are different, then how is someone's reputation being damaged? Again, these are not 100% will protect you from all of the things, but they are good things to do for protection. Number 4 is, I feel, a very important one, and that's don't write in anger. Believe me, I know it is incredibly tempting to write things in anger. It is incredibly tempting to just spew vitriol onto the page and be done with it and that sort of thing. But when it comes to something that you are going to be putting out there, that is going to be out in the world, that's going to be reproduced, etc., 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 do not write in anger. I did it once. In one of my Perzines, I wrote something in anger and I regret it. I don't regret it in that I thought I was wrong. I regret it in that because I was angry at the time, I wrote about this person. It was more about me tearing down the behavior of this person rather than processing the real issue, what had happened and how I felt about it. It was all about, look at this person. This person said this. Why person? Why do you do this thing, person? And so, while I know I would have written about it anyway, I wish I would have waited until I was calmer and thus more able to step back and process what I really needed to process about what happened, rather than just rah, 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 rah. Don't write in anger. I know you want to. Well, you can write in anger, but just don't publish it. Don't publish that first draft. Write it out. Be angry. Tear up the paper, burn the paper, whatever you want to do with it. And then if you still need to process whatever it is, then start processing from a calmer standpoint. And now we are on to number 5, which is the most important tip of them all. And that is, don't make assumptions. Your project being a zine does not protect you from being sued. You being poor does not protect you from being sued. Your zine not making a profit does not protect you from being sued. The fact that you'd be happy to be written about does not protect you from being sued. The fact you didn't mean to hurt anyone does not protect you from being sued. The fact you didn't think anybody would mind does not protect you from being sued. Do not make assumptions. Do not make assumptions about how other people think, about how other people feel. Look at the law and find out. If it's like the consent issue and you're deciding to do it anyway, then do so with the full information. Do so knowing what could come your way. Is it going to come your way? Is it likely to come your way? Maybe not. Maybe zines do afford you some obscurity and thus some protection through that. But in the end, don't go in with ignorance. Don't go in thinking, la la la, I'm above the law. Even if you're an anarchist, even if you think copyright is stupid or whatever, it's still the law. You might not agree with the law, and there are plenty of laws that I don't agree with, let me tell you, but it is the law. I live here, and thus, until something changes, you do what you do. If you want to go ahead and rip off copy somebody's work, copy someone's zine, if you want to go ahead and do that, don't do it out of ignorance. Just do it knowing what could happen, because I don't have any money doesn't hold up in court. It just plain doesn't. As much as I'd like to think that, I'm broke. I'm just breaking even, and thus nobody's going to want to sue me. No, that's just plain not the case, unfortunately. Whew. Okay, zine friends. That was a bit of a tough subject, to say the least, and I feel like I've only just touched the surface, especially on the legality side of things, but at the same time, I'm not fully qualified to talk about the legality side of things. Like I said, there's going to be some resources, a couple links in the description where you can get a start in looking into these things. And again, I don't want to put you off writing a Perzine. I really don't. Or I don't want to put you off writing about businesses and organizations either. But I also, there's two sides to it. On one side, I want people to know. I want people to know what they're risking. I want people to know what they're getting into. I don't want people to be caught off guard and suddenly need a lawyer that they can't afford. I want people to know what they're risking. But at the same time, on the other side of the coin is there may not be such a thing as a single zine community, but there is community to be found in zine making. There are beautiful, wonderful connections to be made with zine makers, and I feel like if we can't respect each other, how can we ever expect respect elsewhere? If you think that it's okay to just do willy-nilly because I'd be fine with it, that's not okay. Because in the end, you're not understanding the ramifications of what you're doing on other people. Saying I'm okay with something isn't good enough, because in the end, if you do a thing, somebody else might see that and then think it's okay because we're just zine makers. We don't give a crap, do we? We're just making zines. But for many of us, zines aren't just zines. They're not little pieces of paper trash to be thrown away. They mean something. And if we can't show that respect in amongst ourselves, then nobody's ever going to respect it outside of zine makers. Nobody's going to think zines are anything other than what we ourselves treat them like. And so that's the other side. That's what I want people to understand. That's what I hope people will understand and at least come to consider when they think they can just, oh, this person won't mind. Oh, it's not going to hurt this person. Oh, I'm not making a profit, so this is okay. No, it's not. It's not. I've mentioned the reasons that sometimes you can't get consent, but when you willfully ignore that just for the sake of, oh, I can't be bothered, or they might say no, then you're making something not great out of something that is amazing. There are possibilities and there are ramifications that you're not considering if you blatantly disregard consent, copyright, and everything in between. And if someone tells you about copyright, if someone brings a concern to you, please don't think that they're attacking you. A lot of zine makers are kind people who are just trying to help and don't want to see yet another fellow zine maker sued. And yes, I say another because it's happened repeatedly. For those who know what I'm talking about, I won't get into it now, but let's just say it's not something we want to see happening with zine makers. It's not on. A quick shout out and a thank you to Wolfram at Queer Content on Twitter. Links in the description. Thank you for bringing up the issue of consent. While it is a big, tough, and very serious topic, I am hoping that I made an informative, if not interesting, podcast for you on the subject. Whew. Let's move on, shall we? So now we come to the Q&A segment where I answer one question from you. Okay, so this week's question comes from Alex at Fanzines, the Zine World calendar person. Alex asks, who was the first zinester you remember meeting and what zine did they make? Now that I'm actually going to talk about two people because in person, the first zine maker I ever met was Laura of Bloom Murder. Now, I found Laura's zine, Shakespeare's Lovers, Macbeth, in Sticky Institute. I was attracted by the shiny orange metallic zine cover, and I reviewed her zine on Sea Green Zines. She got in touch and she actually invited me to Festival of the Photocopier 2016. So I have Laura to thank for me going to the first ever Zine Fest that I went to. And I tabled as well, like first zine event ever, and I tabled. So that was, and Laura did really well with my levels of anxiety. That's for sure. But Laura writes poetry and some short stories and things like that as well. The zines I have of hers are Shakespeare's Lovers, in which she, bumping the mic, my apologies. Shakespeare's Lovers, Macbeth, Twelfth Night, Hamlet, and Ophelia. Sorry, I couldn't read backwards on the screen there. So Hamlet and Ophelia. Now, I'm not sure if these are all the Shakespeare's Lovers ones that she did, but I think so. So that's, we met through her me reviewing her zine. She invited me to Festival of the Photocopier, and yes, she and her friend Tegan are the first people I met. I'm pretty sure it's Tegan, and I'm going to be really embarrassed if it's not Tegan. I apologize in advance if it's not. Anyway, so Laura is the first person I met, zine maker I met in person. Now, the first zine maker I met online, and I'm not sure if she's the very first, but she was very impactful in my life. And that's Karley Bayer. Now, I'm not sure, I don't think she's making zines anymore, but for a long time she made the Filth. The Filth was a zine that had all kinds of poetry and comics and short stories and stuff like that. And it was the first zine I ever submitted to as well. And the issues of the Filth always came with a CD, which I thought was really awesome. And Karley always sewed the binding, which I also thought was awesome. And we traded zines, and she was always really encouraging of my zine making in the early days, that sort of thing. She definitely had a big impact on me in that way. And it was actually she encouraged me to write the intro for the Filth issue 6, and that was the first intro I'd done as well. So yeah, lots of firsts that happened in the Filth, a sadly no longer running zine series, but one that was very, very cool, and I was very, very happy to be included in. So yeah, first person in person was Laura at Bloom Murder, and the first person online was Karley Bayer. And thanks to them both, they are both important figures in my zine past who encouraged me in different ways, and all for the better. That is for sure. If you have any questions about zines, zine reviewing, me, anything else really, anything else you think I can answer, please feel free to get in touch. There are various comment areas. There's Instagram messaging. There's Tumblr if you want to be anonymous, that sort of thing. that's it. I'm around. I'm around in lots of different places. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Try to keep it appropriate. That sort of thing. And not because. I skipped it last week because last week's episode is really long, and I think this one's going to end up really long too, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do this segment anyway, even though this is a long episode. It is time for Sharing is Caring, my little non-sponsored segment where I share zine spaces, places, and all sorts of things that I am really loving. And this week, I am really loving the free zine! Dun dun dun! Now, you can't see this obviously in the podcast, but in the video, I'm holding up The Life and Times of Billy Roberts, $50 Minimum by Sober Bob, and Sensitive Adult Daily by Darcy Rock in Melbourne. Now, I have a little blue sheet here in the Sensitive Adult Daily because I have about 6 of them and they're all clipped together, and I'm actually going to review them, and the blue sheet is my notes for that. Anyway, the free zine, the brochure, the put together page sent around the world sometimes, or just to your friends. I feel like it's a subgenre of Perzines. It's the Christmas letter that you get, but it doesn't involve all the boring things, or Uncle Bob's toenail issue or something. I just grabbed that out of there. Anyway, I love them. I love them so much, and it's not just because they're free, even though free makes things easier in a lot of ways for a lot of people. But yes, the short free mailing list Perzine, I absolutely love it. Their slice of life, their little glimpses, their little contemplations, this is what's happening in the moment. They are blog posts that come to your mailbox, and it's beautiful, and I love it. And there's no expectation, there's no anything. It's just, I made a thing, I want to express these thoughts and send them out and make of them what you will, and I absolutely love it. And there are all sorts of them. There's, like the ones I have here, the $50 Minimum by Sober Bob, The Life and Times of Billy Roberts, which is no longer going, but he's just started a new one. And then Sensitive Adult Daily. I adore these. But I will save my commentary for the review. And there's You Zine, which is not Perzine so much as anonymous letters and things. Anyway, I apologize for the gap. My phone's just let me know that I'm whinging on a bit. Anyway, so yes, sharing is caring. Yay for the free mailing list Perzine /zine / slice of life / should have its own subgenre zine. Thank you to all the people who make them, and thank you especially to the people who make them and put me on their mailing list. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and I highly encourage people to make them. If you're interested in checking one out, I do have my own called Missives from Murray Bridge. Get in touch and I'll see if I can get you some copies of those so you can find out what I'm prattling on about. Now, as my phone just let me know, I am getting on in the whole recording. So, that is it for today, Zine friends. Thank you again so much to everyone for joining me and for all the comments. I promise next episode we'll try something lighter on for a change. Remember that everything I say is my opinion, and there are no gatekeepers in the Zineverse, nor should there ever be. Now, links to the things I've talked about and either in the spotlight or the main content, all the links are in the description. Be sure to stop by seagreenzines.com where I review zines every Thursday and Friday. And I do need to do a shout out for the music for this podcast, which is Spanish Summer by Audionautics. That is licensed under a Creative Commons Attributions license. Okay, let's wrap this up. This is the Zine Collector. I'm your host, Jaime Nyx. Until next time, go make some zines. Mwah! I am definitely going to do a lighter topic next episode. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be a light one. So much serious happening.